Hey everybody, hope you guys are healthy and safe. So this is the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra. I published my review of this a couple days ago, so if you saw that, you should know I love this phone. I think it is an apex slab smartphone right now. But this phone's also a little bit expensive at $1,200. So if you want the latest Samsung offering, but you don't want to spend this much, Samsung has two other options for you. They have the S21 Plus and the S21, the standard S21. Now the Plus starts at 1,000 US dollars, while the S21 starts at 800 US dollars. So they are a little bit cheaper than the Galaxy S21 Ultra, but you do lose out on some features. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what are the differences between all three phones and what parts are the same. Hopefully that'll help you with your purchase decision. So before we begin, I wanted to say that the S21 Plus and S21 have a lot more in common together than with the S21 Ultra. These two phones are almost exactly the same, except that the standard S21 uses a plastic back, while the S21 Plus still uses a Gorilla Glass back. To be honest though, Samsung did a pretty good job with the plastic this year. It doesn't feel cheap. And if you're holding the phone like right now, you can't quite tell the difference between the two. The only time you can tell the difference between the glass and plastic build is when you leave the phone in cold weather. So for example, when I wake up every morning, it's kind of cold, I pick up this phone, you can feel that the glass is cool to the touch, whereas this plastic still feels kind of like warm because it's plastic. Plastic don't get cold like metal. So the S21 Plus obviously is a little bit bigger. It has a 6.7 inch OLED display compared to the 6.2 inch screen. The battery sizes are different too. You have 4,800 milliamp hour here and 4,000 milliamp hour here. That's it. Other than these three areas, screen size, battery, and back build material, these two phones are exactly the same. So all the differences now will come between the S21 Ultra and the other two phones. So all the other major differences will be between the Ultra and the other two phones. So let's start by talking about what's the same across all three phones. All three of them run on Snapdragon 888. This is Qualcomm's newest 5nm chipset. Oh, that's in Hong Kong, China, and the US. If you're watching this in Europe, you might be getting the Exynos 2100, but either way, the chip across all three phones are the same in your region. And at least the Snapdragon 888, it's going to be bleeding edge technology, the most powerful chip this year in Android. So you don't have to worry about performance. The software is also exactly the same. All three phones run on One UI 3.1 over Android 11. One UI 3.1 is relatively clean, customizable, so I kind of like it. The only thing I have to complain about is that out of the box, they try to get you to use Samsung Pay, and the gesture to activate Samsung Pay is by swiping up from the bottom of the screen. And that's the same gesture you use to swipe up to exit out of an app. So that's really damn annoying. But you can turn that off, so just turn it off and it won't bother you anymore. The overall design language is also the same in all three phones. Okay, that's about it in terms of similarities. Now let's go over the differences. So the first thing you notice is that the screen, the Ultra has a curved panel, whereas the S21 Plus and the S21 has flat panels. Not only that, the Ultra screen gets a little bit brighter at 1500 nits to the 1300 nits of the S21 Plus and the S21. And the S21 Ultra's panel has a variable refresh rate up to 120 Hz, but also as low as 10 Hz, whereas the screens on here and the S21 refreshes up to 120 and 48, so it doesn't get as low. So that means the Ultra screen is just a little bit more versatile in terms of adjusting its refresh rate depending on your needs. Now that's not all. The display resolution of the Ultra is also a little bit higher. The panel here, it's a 1440p panel. That's basically a 2K panel, whereas on the S21 and S21 Plus is actually just a 1080p panel, 1080p resolution. Now the second major difference comes in the camera module. So the S21 and S21 Plus, they have a triple camera system with a 12 megapixel main camera, 12 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, and a 64 megapixel telephoto zoom lens. So the main camera is only 12 megapixel compared to the Ultra's 108 megapixel camera. So there are two different sensors with two different technologies. The 108 megapixel sensor is used to shoot pixel bin images down to 12 megapixel, and it also has a large image sensor size that gives you a shallower depth of focus. Whereas the 12 megapixel sensor here, it's very similar to the hardware used in last year's S20 Plus, and maybe even not that far off from the S10 Plus's camera. Now the ultra wide angle camera here, the Ultra, feels very similar to the ultra wide angle camera, the Plus and the Standard, but except the Ultra's ultra wide has autofocus, so that allows you to take macro shot, meaning you can get really close to the subject. You cannot do that with the S21 Plus or the standard S21. There is no macro mode in this phone. Now the biggest difference though comes in the telephoto zoom lens. So the Ultra has two zoom lenses. It has a 10 megapixel 3x optical zoom lens here and a 10 megapixel periscope zoom lens here. So this periscope zoom lens, as I've explained many times, is a completely different technology from most other camera sensors in smartphones. It's a lens that's placed sideways in your phone so light can travel like further through a series of magnifying glasses before it reaches the image signal processor. With the S21 Plus and the S21, you only have one zoom lens and it's a 64 megapixel telephoto zoom lens. So it's not a periscope lens, it's just a traditional sensor. And really what Samsung is doing is using that 64 megapixel sensor to digitally crop to give you the illusion of a zoom. It's really only just a 3x optical zoom lens here. Anything beyond 3x optical zoom, it's digital zoom, which means you're just cropping into the picture. With that said, however, I find that the S21 Plus and S21 still gives you pretty decent 10x zoom, and even up to 20x zoom, it's okay. Like you start seeing quite a lot loss of details, but it's nothing too bad. A hell lot better than what the iPhone 12 Pro or 12 can do, to be honest. But obviously, it is no match to what the S21 Ultra can do with that 10x periscope zoom lens. Don't just take my word for it. Look at the 10x zoom samples between the Ultra and the S21 Plus or the standard S21. Let's go back to the main camera really quick. So that main camera during the day, actually performance between the 108 megapixel sensor and the 12 megapixel sensor here, it's very, very similar. But at night or in dim light settings, because the 108 megapixel sensor has such a large image sensor and because it uses pixel binning technology, it is just a better nighttime camera. Like photos are just a little bit more dynamic looking, dynamic range is better, there's a little bit better lit. Now the battery of the Ultra is also a little bit larger, 5000 milliamp hour, but because this panel has more pixels and the phone's a little bit larger, I find battery life to be a little bit better on the S21 Plus and the S21. Now to be honest, the user experience between all three phones should be very similar for most casual users. So that means if you are just taking very basic photos like of your dog during the day, taking selfies, you know, like going on Instagram, stuff like that, you're not going to see a big difference. Where you will see a big jump in the Ultra is if you do niche photography, like photography in really dark settings, macro photography, or you want to get close to something without moving closer, like take a 20x zoom photo. Other than that, everything else is almost exactly the same. Although personally, I find the curved panel of the Ultra much more better looking, mesmerizing than the flat panel of the S21 Plus. The S21 Plus looks a little bit bland in my opinion because of that flat panel. I think a little bit of curves help a phone look a lot better. So whether or not the extra zooming capabilities and the macro lens and slightly better nighttime photos is worth the extra $200 over the Plus or $400 over the standard S21, it's up to you. I'm someone who's always want the most powerful bleeding edge technology, so for me, I'm gonna go for the Ultra every single time. But I'm also spoiled because I have money to spend, you know, like I have disposable income. For people who are on a tight budget, $800 for this might just give you almost the exact same experience as the S21 Ultra. Although, I would say if you live somewhere where Chinese phones are available and you don't have any problems with buying Chinese phones, I would say either get the Ultra, like either splurge and get the Ultra, or if you have to save money and you just want to spend $700, you might as well get the Xiaomi Mi 11 or like the Vivo X60 Plus. You get a little bit more premium components, like still a glass back, a curved screen, and you know, a proper zoom camera without having to settle. This is Samsung kind of making compromises, making cuts here and there to give you a lower price point. Oh, forgot to mention this. The haptic engine in these two phones are weaker than the haptic engine in the Ultra too. So if you type and you care about the haptic vibrations on your phone, the Ultra's haptics are definitely better than these two too. So Samsung's kind of made little cuts here and there to meet the $800 and $1,000 price point. Now a lot of you guys are gonna scoff at $800 and $1,000 as like price cuts, but to be honest, these phones do still have bleeding edge components in terms of screen, the 120Hz panel looks great here, even if it's not as high res as the Ultra. The Snapdragon 888 is still a bleeding edge SoC. But ultimately, it comes down to your spending power and whether or not you really want to use Samsung. There are a hell lot of options out there on Android if you don't live in the US. So that's about it for this video. I hope this helped. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to get more content like this. And I get my hands on all the latest phones if you just want to keep up to date with all the latest gadgets. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Take care, stay healthy.